Good morning, everybody. Welcome into today's episode of FreightWaves Now. I'm Kaylee Nix. Joining me is Anthony Smith on your Wednesday morning.
That's right. On today's episode, we get to chat with Blythe Brumleve on the art of warm selling, and we've got a hot seat segment you just have to see to believe in the next hour. But first, our top story takes us to Washington, where a new bill is headed through Congress that could overhaul the trucking industry. Our own Washington correspondent, John Gallagher, is here to join us about that top story today. John, thanks so much for being here this morning, and let's just jump straight into it. What is this big bill that's working its way through the industry or would be potentially hitting the industry?
Hi, Anthony. Yes, this is this was introduced yesterday by a bipartisan pair, Dusty Johnson from South Dakota and Jim Costa from California, both in heavy agriculture producing districts. So basically, this bill called the Safer Highways and Increased Performance for Interstate Trucking Act, and it's acronym to SHIP it, and it's basically the gist of it is it's a driver recruitment bill, but it also incorporates legislation that has been pushed for in the past by both carriers, drivers, and shippers as well to basically make it easier regulatorily and make it easier for truckers to haul freight. So a big part of it is a tax credit, and you guys have to. I apologize. I had some bullet points set up, and my just as we went on, my scroll doesn't work. But I'll try to remember as best I can. It's basically a big part of it is tax credits for new truck drivers, and it's going to depend on the tax credits, either $7,500 or $10,000 in the bill, and it depends on several factors, including how much money the truck driver makes. You have to make under a certain amount, $90,000 if you file for single status, or I believe $90,000 if you file for single status, and I believe it's $135,000 if you do dual filing with a spouse. It also depends on how much you drove your truck in the tax year that you're filing for, and also the previous tax year. So it will depend on that. That's a factor in whether you get the $7,500 tax credit or $10,000 tax credit, both of which are pretty big for I would think for truck drivers. And it so that's the tax credit part of the bill. But there are also other parts of the bill, again, that have been raised before in previous legislation, including the truck parking funding bill that both small truckers and large truckers have been trying to get for the last few years now. It's basically $755 million over the next 4 years for truck parking expansion. There's a provision in there to expand the definition of what an agriculture product is, and also so that would expand how many products would be eligible for a 150 mile distance between where the product is picked up and where it's delivered for that now currently those haulers now currently get an exemption from hours of service, some of the hours of service rules, and the ELD as well. So by expanding the definition, you get more products that are eligible for that, and also it expands the time of year. Right now, that much of that exemption is based on during the growing season, but this would expand that for all year round. So it's big for ag shippers there as well. It also streamlines the CDL, going back to entry-level drivers. It also expands the process by which they can get their. It improves streamlines how the CDL trainers have to train drivers, and there's also a provision in there that allows the entry-level drivers to take advantage of a labor law that would allow them to use funding to cut down on the cost of their training as well. So it's a pretty expensive bill, and so that's sort of the basics of it.
So expansive is definitely right. And it's always very interesting when you see this bipartisan introduction, right? And it makes sense when you talk about that it's coming both from very ag-heavy districts. What does this support maybe look like in Congress? Obviously, we know we've got the split House and the split Senate net right now. Is this looking at maybe having a pretty big chance of passing because a lot of these Congress people are very much aligned?
Yeah, just the fact that it was introduced on a bipartisan basis tells you something right there. That's always a good start. And yeah, it is a split Congress, and they have all these things, as we've been hearing about in the news, that they want to get to, like immigration reform and all these things. But the House T&I committee is these two sit on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and they're pretty adamant about trying to get things done in these next 2 years. So it could have a good chance. It also has a lot of early support from shippers. In fact, there's a group called the Shippers Coalition, and they're made up of about, I think it's around 80 or so really major consumer products type shippers, like PepsiCo and Anheuser-Busch, I believe, are two of their big members. And it's also, so it's got that kind of consumer product end product shipper, but it also has big support from the early on from the American Chemistry Council, which is more industrial type shippers, energy and chemical manufacturers. So those are big, and those have big lobby groups in Congress. So that also kind of speaks well to something that this might move, and it kind of packages things together. Like I said, the truck parking bill and other things that have been pushed for sort of on a one bill, like just a one issue bill. And Congress a lot of times likes to kind of push things together and have bills where you can attach things and move things quicker. So, and it gets more support for all of these different issues that have been sort of out there by different sections of, either carriers or shippers. So we'll see what happens, but those are I guess you could say that those are sort of early positives for it.
And as you said, John, this is definitely something that is certainly expansive. One of the things I think I heard you mention was, of course, some changes to truck parking and hours of service for those that are livestock haulers. Do we see this potentially be the groundwork being laid for other haulers throughout the supply chain?
Yeah, no, possibly that could be. Like I said, those two bills have been, or those two, I guess, issues and legislation have been put forth in several, at least the last Congress, and I think maybe a Congress before that. So those have momentum already. So it might to expand that for more lenient hours of service for. More generally, is something that, as we know, a lot of truckers have been pushing for. So we'll see if this kind of is an impetus for more leniency or more expansion of hours of service. Reducing hours of service regulatory hurdles, I guess.
It's going to be interesting to watch for sure. John, thank you for joining us this morning, and thanks for keeping your finger on the pulse. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, you guys.
All right, now we're going to head over to the wall for our first carrier update of the morning.
Welcome into this carrier update. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by Donnie Gilbert. Donnie, we talk every day about the truckload market, but we're going to start today a little different. We're going to look further upstream. What's going on in the ocean market?
Yeah, and of course, the U.S. is a really big import market, and a lot of times you can see what's going to happen in the trucking industry, really based on what's happening with imports, and even before that, bookings for those ships before they even start to sail. So right now, we're going to start off with the TEU volumes that are out on the ocean here. And of course, you see, starting back, if we go to January 2022, we're way up here at around the 200 mark, a little bit over the 200 mark, maybe 215-ish. The big decline here that we went through, and then it dropped down here, and we're at this 100, right below 100 right here. But you still see an upward trend over the last few weeks. Well, we have a Chinese New Year's holiday coming up. They're going to try to load probably as much on the ships as they can before that holiday and get it out on the ocean. We're going to see a dip in volumes. You can see it back here, right in here in February. That's where it slows down. Like I say, it's a Chinese New Year's holiday. It's not a holiday across the world or anything, but it does have a large effect because China was one of our largest importing markets, a market that we imported the most from. So we will see it just a little bit here. But the big story is we are, year over year, we've had a 50% decline in volumes, and that will flow through. That's part of the reason we are overstocked here in the U.S., and we're just not ordering more. We don't need anything else right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the luxury of using Container Atlas for this is we can dial it down into those countries, and we'll move on to the next chart here, and we'll look at what China, the U.S. is doing, and you can see that ramp up or pull forward before the Lunar New Year because it started on the 22nd, so just a couple days ago. And you can kind of see, look at what happened, ramp up, and then a pretty quick decline, right?
Yeah. So I should have mentioned the first chart I had was imports to the U.S. from all over the world. And then this one right here is broken down to just China and the U.S. And this is where, yes, you see it building up, and then you see the fall start. And this will be more aggressive as we go through the next few days. But looking at China, I say being one of our largest importers that we import from, these volumes are just going downhill, 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 downhill. Now, a signal that things might be turning around, it was uphill, uphill, uphill. Remember, we still got quite a ways. Let's go to the next chart here and see where we look at bookings here. This also could be another good indicator. I was looking for the numbers, but it might be in my next chart. But to cross the ocean is right now, I think, averaging 35 days. So you're going to see the bookings start first, picking up. Then you'll see the shipments start picking up. When the ships start leaving the ports, it's going to be about 35 to 45 days before they get into LAX. And then it could be another 4, 5, 6 days before they cross customs. So here we're getting a huge forward look. I just simply looking at bookings right now.
Yeah, because if you look at the TEUs, that's based on when they leave the port. The bookings are when they're submitted to the ocean carrier. We'll move on to our next chart. We've got lead times, and that is the difference between when it's booked and when it's coming, and it's right around that 8-day mark. And so you're talking 8 days from something submitted to the ocean carrier before it leaves the port. So that drop in bookings will ultimately lead to that drop in
It was
volume.
up to 14. It's dropped from 14 to 8, and that's also a sign of market deterioration. You don't need to request capacity so early. You can wait longer now because the ships have plenty of capacity.
Absolutely. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee next.
All right, thanks, guys. It's time for our first check of our top stories this morning from FreightWaves.com. Union Pacific had its fourth quarter earnings call yesterday. The company said that it will aim to boost rail service and improve the employees' quality of life in 2023. One of those measures includes testing a program that would give employees a set schedule instead of having them always be on call. UP also said they are exploring additional options for crews, like having extra employees on hand, even in tough economic times. That way, the rail network is able to keep up with service expectations while getting employees their requested time off. Tesla is investing $3.6 billion to build 2 new factories in Nevada, including a facility to mass produce its all-electric Class 8 semi. The other factory will produce batteries for the Tesla Cybertruck as well as for the semi. Together, the plants will create about 3,000 jobs. Tesla delivered its first semi-trucks to Frito-Lay in California last December, and CEO Elon Musk has said that the company will produce up to 50,000 semis per year. And Amazon has launched a dedicated air cargo network in India through a partnership with third-party carrier QuickJet to increase delivery speeds for e-commerce orders to major cities. Amazon Air has slowed its growth in recent months alongside the slowing e-commerce demand, but this establishment shows that the retailer is still in expansion mode. The company will utilize capacity on 2 Boeing 737-800 series converted freighters. And you can find details of these stories and more up on FreightWaves.com and our FreightWaves app. If you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated, and follow us on social media as well. For the full FreightWaves TV experience, head on over to tv.freightwaves.com. We'll take a quick break and come back with our first check of the weather for your morning. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our first check of the weather for this morning. We're still watching that pretty strong winter storm move up to the northeast after already seeing about 8 inches in some places of snowfall across central Oklahoma. Even got some snow down in the Dallas-Fort Worth metro last night as that cold air slowly started to make its way to the southeast. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. Right now we can see really clearly where that storm is going to head if we just look at the swath of winter weather watches and warnings going up from central Mississippi up through the St. Louis area, up through central Indiana, and then eventually to the Toledo, Ohio area. We're going to be watching for some heavy snowfall once again. Some of this could turn into some blizzard conditions if we are not careful, because we've got some strong winds coming in behind that, coming off of the lake shores as well. So with that, more snowfall expected, and this is going to be kind of a multiple round event. So let's turn on the radar and we can see what's going on right now. So we've got this pretty wide swath of snow that stretches all the way up from Michigan down in through central Missouri. And we can see that it's just going to kind of continue. There will be some slots where that drier air works in, and then back behind it, more light snowfall moves back into the area. So if you're on the front side of that in this kind of warm slot here, we are done with the precipitation, but if you're on the back side, the cold side of the storm, more snowfall expected for you today. Overall, amounts are going to really vary with this one, and it's really just going to depend on how far you are away from kind of the central axis. Heaviest amount's going to be from St. Louis up through the Indianapolis area and then up into western Ohio, northeastern Indiana. That's where we've got those winter storm warnings in place. So any of those interstates running through there are fair game to have dangerous driving conditions today and into tomorrow as that snow kind of lingers throughout the evening and overnight hours tonight. We'll talk a little bit more about what this is going to bring on the cold side up to upstate New York, Pennsylvania, and places where they've seen a lot of snow already. We'll talk about that coming up later on in the show. Right now, we'll toss things over to Isaiah. He's got our first check of the social roundabout this morning.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and I got a pretty interesting story to start things out this time on this segment. So the Bronx Zoo has been doing this for several years. We know Valentine's Day is coming up here in just a couple of weeks. And if there's an ex that maybe just broke your heart and you just want to get back at them in some kind of way, why don't you just name a cockroach after them? That's what the Bronx Zoo is doing. They had this video on their website, and they're going to be talking about how you can name your ex or your Valentine, depending on where you want to go in this relationship, after a cockroach. And you see all this stuff on the screen, it comes with all of that. You get a roach tumbler, a tote bag, and you even get a virtual encounter with a hissing cockroach. Now, I don't know who would want to have a virtual encounter with a hissing cockroach, but all of that will only cost you $75. And the Bronx Zoo is the one who started out this whole entire trend, and it's kind of spread all over the country. The San Antonio Zoo does their own version of this with cockroaches called Cry Me a Cockroach, and it's basically where you can name a cockroach after your ex, which is really cool and really funny in my opinion. The Toronto Zoo up in Canada also has a similar cockroach event that they do around Valentine's Day as well. That's been really popular. They've made over $15,000 just this year already. So these cockroach events are probably going to be something that we see every year just to have a little fun around the Valentine's Day holiday. Now, switching things up just a little bit, there was a man at McDonald's. He ordered a sausage McMuffin and instead was handed thousands of dollars in a McDonald's bag. Take a look at this video.
I just went to McDonald's and he's handing me my sausage McMuffin and this bag. Well, what's in this bag? Their fucking deposit. Why? Just a couple $1,000s here. Like, what is this? Why would they do this? What the fuck? So now I have to return this because I'm a good person, I guess. Yeah, how interesting. Okay, I'm at McDonald's.
That man is a much better person than I am. It would have taken every bone in my body to walk back in there and hand that money back over to McDonald's. And that's what he did, and then they ended up giving him, I think, $200 in cash, and then they ended up giving him his sausage McMuffin. So at least he got his food. So like I said, much better man than I am, because I would have driven off with that money and probably just, spend it on some other food somewhere else. Kaylee and Anthony, what would you do if you had money instead of your food like that?
I don't know about the money, but I just kind of wonder how many girls are going to pay $75 to name a cockroach Isaiah this year.
I am seeing quite a few questionable relationship trends coming from Isaiah's social roundabouts, and I'm going to have a chat with him. Also, I'd return that money and hopefully see if that can get me some free fries for a year, potentially.
Pays it forward. I don't know. All right, Isaiah, thank you for that. We'll catch up with you again in just a minute. Speaking of money that is shocking, PACCAR released their fourth quarter results to some shock as well. And we've got Alan Adler here to talk about it. Alan, thanks for joining us. Let's dig into this a little bit because I think a lot of folks were kind of concerned about OEM performance, both for Q4 and for full year 2022. And PACCAR came out and said, hold my beer, watch this, let's do it.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody's going to perform quite that well. We've seen an indication that Daimler will do okay. They had a good year. They tend to pre-announce their numbers. And of course, they are the market leader, followed by PACCAR. PACCAR just continues to surprise, I think, in a way, both at the revenue and at the profits. And this is a really well-run company. The funny thing when you get on their analyst calls is they don't have to answer a lot of questions because the analysts give them almost a pass. I mean, they'll ask the question, they'll get sort of a, on the one hand, on the other hand answer, and they'll move on. They don't press because they don't need to. I mean, what they're mostly doing is rewriting their estimates for earnings. We saw one this morning that raised the price per share from $108 to $131 this year, based on everything that they're seeing. The net margin in the fourth quarter was 17%. I mean, these guys tend to run in the 13 to 15% range. So the analysts want to know, well, is that a reset? Are we seeing a higher range now? We don't know, but the market is the market. So they're not getting a lot of good answers. And honestly, at this point, PACCAR doesn't have to provide them because they're doing it with performance.
Alan, I can't help but see that you're wearing a Peterbilt hat. Are you being paid to speak on behalf of PACCAR right now, or is this just purely coincidence?
I am not. It's getting really warm, so I'm going to take it off. It was because I had one in my closet, and I thought, why not? But
I love it. Branding.
Yeah, no, they are not paying me for this. I would say though that there's a couple of things we heard yesterday that are important. One is that what you're looking at with the both the deliveries and the orders and everything at PACCAR and the part sales, we can't overlook those because that's such a big part of what they're doing right now is growing the parts business. What you've got to look at with PACCAR is they're estimating 49,000 to 53,000 truck builds in the first quarter. Those are also pretty high numbers. And it also suggests that some of this, you may remember the term red tagging that we used to describe trucks that were built almost to completion but had to wait for a part. Well, PACCAR's pretty much past that. They cleaned out the rest of that in the fourth quarter. There's still a range for build in the first quarter because, supply issues come all the time. They come and they go. But generally, the supply chain crisis appears to have eased significantly. That allows more builds. That's also pushing more used trucks out now because fleets can trade those trucks in after having held on to them for so long. And PACCAR's there too because they have a big used truck operation. So they're really making money at every stop on the line here, and also in financial services because they finance a lot of these trucks. And we won't even get into the fact that they build their own engines, and that penetration versus Cummins offerings are growing too. So it's hard to find stuff to pick at in PACCAR's numbers right now.
And Alan, when we're looking at PACCAR, are there any lessons that others can learn from them, or are they just so involved in so many different aspects of the business that it just makes it difficult to replicate?
Anthony, I'm going to throw a number at you, which I'm just stunned by at PACCAR. They have reported a net income for 84 consecutive years. So I would argue that what they do is run the business really well. They're pretty conservative. They don't get out there, there's not a lot of crazy talk about this, that, and the next thing. They tend to not chase trends. They continue to believe electrification, for example, will be part of the industry, but it's not going to be the whole industry, certainly not in the near term. So, they're equipped. They've got 9 different electric models that they offer right now, and they can build however many are needed, but those are still small numbers. And so there's just not much that suggests that these guys, take their eye off the ball. And I think that's really where that might be the lesson to answer your question is just keep your eye on the ball and swing where it makes sense to swing. And I think in PACCAR's case, you've also got to look at their European operations, which are doing really well with DAF trucks. That's the third brand. It's not sold here in North America, but this is Kenworth and Peterbilt country. But DAF is doing well both in Europe and in Brazil. They've seen share gains in both places. And underlying all of this is new products across the board. PACCAR, Kenworth, Peterbilt, and DAF have all introduced new products in medium duty and in heavy duty over the last 2 years. All of those have pretty much made the switch over. There's not a lot of older product being built anymore. These are more fuel-efficient trucks. I know I'm sounding like an ad, really, but these are more fuel-efficient trucks, and quite honestly, they're doing very well. It gained 0.6 of a point of market share in North America. That is U.S. and Canada, as PACCAR counts it, to 29.8%. That's also pretty impressive.
I'm glad that you brought up the European operations because it's something that I think is interesting to talk about when we talk about kind of the tale of two sides of the world when it comes to truck sales, right? Are we looking at truck sales there being any type of leading indicator, there as in Europe, being any type of leading indicator on the overall strength of their market? Or is it just kind of is it just one of those numbers that they're just continuing to perform no matter where the European truck market's heading?
Well, again, you've got different emission regulations in Europe. Some are strong. I think we're up to Euro 6 and looking at Euro 7 now. I couldn't unpack that for you, so don't ask. But I would tell you that that PACCAR is meeting the market, with these new products and gaining share there as well. They're looking, by the way, people are talking about a downturn. I mean, PACCAR sees 270,000 to 310,000 total units of sales, both in in North America and in Europe this year, which are pretty aggressive given that we're supposed to be seeing a pullback. So, again, Europe is really hard to understand since we don't cover it regularly. But again, PACCAR, really does stick to the basics. They've had a lot of awards for their new trucks over there, and they have become or are growing as a market leader. I mean, there's a lot more competition, Kaylee, over there from, say, Volvo and, of course, Daimler than there is here. So when you're looking at almost 30% share in North America versus, 17, 18% in Europe, they are much more of a pack player there. Whereas they're, kind of number two in this market. So I think it's just, when you run the business well one place, you tend to do it the same way another place. And, this is not a big risk-taking company. And, staying close to, what's important. And, you get a lot of comments about customers, but you know what? It is that. I mean, they're satisfying the customers. They get a premium pricing on their new trucks as well as their used trucks. They claim 15% premium on used trucks, which is over others, which is pretty amazing if you think about it.
So obviously this is a gold star on their resume coming out for both Q4 and 2022, but they did have a couple of instances of recalls and some just regular machinery malfunction last year. Did that have any impact on the confidence towards PACCAR, or is this enough to kind of erase that from folks' memories?
I think those are kind of in separate buckets. I mean, safety recalls are part of everybody's business. PACCAR did have a couple of, higher profile recalls. Again, not with, there's some cost to remedying those things, but a lot of times those costs are passed on to the supplier if there's a supplier involved. So they're a blemish, but I don't really think they say anything. You don't tend to hear much about recalls in earnings unless there's something that was, what's called material, to the earnings, and PACCAR did not experience anything like that.
And Alan, you mentioned that there are other earnings that we're waiting for. Do you have any expectations for any other earnings coming out?
Well, I'm going to be very curious. Later tonight, and I'm not going to get up for it, I'll do it in the morning, but Volvo will report over in Sweden tonight, and that's going to be an interesting one to watch. They have not done as well, maybe, as some of the competitors, but we'll look and see. I mean, again, we're looking at fourth quarter. I think, the pundits, if you will, that are predicting a slowdown, a mild recession and things like that, they're going to just pitch forward to the first quarter and say, what we really meant to say was the first quarter is going to be tough. So I wouldn't expect bad numbers from Volvo. I would think that the supply chain improving definitely is going to help them. But, Volvo took more downtime than a lot of the companies did in terms of ability to produce trucks. PACCAR was the first that we reported anyway that was doing that sort of red tagging well back into last year and into 2022. And I think that, that's something that, they've worked through. Now they're able to, fully produce trucks. I don't think that Volvo really went to that as much. They tended to just take the downtime, and not produce. So we'll see what they report later. Well, actually, tomorrow we'll talk about it.
Right, Alan, well, thank you for joining us. And of course, we'll keep a watch on that. We can catch you on Truck Tech this afternoon at 4 o'clock. So we will see you then.
Yes, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Right now, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now.
to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Watson, enterprise trucking carrier expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
FreightWaves Now, we're going to welcome in our next live guest. We've got Mike Bush joining us from Next Trucking, talking a little bit about payments and honestly why they're an underrated topic. Mike, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Kaylee, Anthony, great to be back with you. Happy New Year to everybody. I think I've got a couple more days where I can still say that.
Happy New Year. I think like technically till the end of January, you're good to talk about it, right? So let's go ahead and get into payments. I feel like there's a lot of conversation about streamlining your payments and making payments easy, but it's very easy to get in over your head, right? You've got too many options at the buffet. What are we talking about from a payment standpoint right now, where the industry's at?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Kaylee. There are a ton of options, and I think when you look at consumer expectations and the way consumers operate, we're used to PayPal or Zelle, where you can immediately send money via mobile and it just arrives, right? Like if I lost my fantasy football league, I can send money immediately and it arrives. But when it comes to the freight space and the freight industry, there's an awful lot of intermediaries, right? Like the first thing you have to consider is there's the shipper who probably has a broker involved who, then needs to pay the carrier. So there's kind of an extra, that middleman really creates a hurdle. And as you look at what's happening across the macro environmental space, the first thing you're seeing is that, shippers are not only trying to save costs or save money in terms of headcount. We've seen layoffs across the board. Certainly in our industry, we've seen Flexport and Uber Freight go through layoffs, but it's not limited to freight tech. Companies across the board are going through layoffs. Another way that companies tend to save money or focus on, their cash flow is to push their payment terms. And I think, as we've seen, shippers have gained a ton more power as of late, and they're kind of throwing their weight around. Some shippers have said, look, we want a net 60 or a net 90-day payment, and that, of course, has downstream effects.
You also talk about some of the aspects of the real benefits that it's going to have to just having, I think, more driver satisfaction in the long run, because one of the things that we always hear from drivers is just some of the confusion around pay or making pay a little bit too late or just understanding it. And it seems like this could be an aspect that could really be streamlined and really cause a lot more driver satisfaction as well.
Yeah, Anthony, there's the holy trinity in the trucking space, right? Pay me more, pay me faster, give me more loads. I think we're all kind of used to that when you work on the brokerage side. But I think one of the challenges we're seeing is that as shippers have pushed rates out, there becomes a circumstance where, as a broker, you need to be paying despite the fact that you might not be collecting for 60 or even 90 days. That creates a real challenge for some of the smaller brokerages especially, but brokerages across the board, right? Like if the idea is, if I'm not going to be paid for 90 days, but I need to pay a trucker or a carrier tomorrow, there's a real challenge here. I think you're going to see a lot of factoring companies take advantage of the market over the next few months, some of which are terrific and do an amazing job of making sure that truckers are paid easily. Some of which, quite frankly, probably are more loan shark than asset to or ally to the trucking industry.
It's very interesting that you bring up those factoring companies because we're starting to see some rules come out from the governmental side, from financial accounting rules to say, you know what, if you're going to use factoring companies, you got to now start reporting it, right? And you have to be a little bit clearer about factoring, and not to the point where you're talking about assuming that is short-term debt, but to the point where if you're factoring, you need to let people know, so that way it might maybe change people's willingness or worthiness to work with you. Do you think that this is something that companies are really going to have to fight with now, is maybe making that factoring use a little bit more known? And will that kind of turn some folks off from working with some of those companies?
Kaylee, I think it's actually going to be driven by the end user. If I'm a carrier and I'm determined to say, listen, I need to maintain my cash flow to pay my drivers, make sure that they can put food on their table, there are going to be times where I might have to make the decision to ask my broker, hey, will you work with a factoring company? I think we're going to see end users far more aggressively bring factoring companies to the table. At least in the short term, as we see sort of this longevity in terms of payouts from shippers.
And Mike, in terms of freight tech, do you see, and of course, the topic of this segment is why payments are such an underrated issue in the trucking industry. Do you see that the freight tech space will really be starting to cater to this potentially in the coming years, or do you think this will continue to kind of go under the radar?
I think it's going to come to the forefront, Anthony. I think this is such a big challenge in terms of making sure, one of the easiest way for a business to go out of business is to have a huge amount of collectible debt, right? So I think you're going to see, and I think we even saw it at F3 this year, there was a huge number of payments players on board, and it seems like everybody, every third booth was, we're going to be the PayPal or we're going to be the Zelle of the freight space. I think there's tremendous interest in solving this particular issue, which really isn't going to go away as you look at, the majority of shippers who are trying to manage their own books and trying to avoid their own layoffs are really having to stretch cash and stretch dollars. And that in many cases does mean stretching payout terms. So if you're a carrier, if you're a broker, that could mean something like a bridge loan. It could mean something like, listen, as a carrier, maybe accepting credit cards. I know a lot of carriers have historically shied away from that, saying, look, I'd rather give 3% of my income to a factoring company as opposed to an interchange fee. But at the end of the day, carriers that are create more flexibility, whether it's partnering with Stripe to say, yes, we'll accept credit cards, or finding other ways to offload their collectibles or offload the debt that they're owed, are going to be the ones that are successful, at least for, the next 6 to 9 months of what is anticipated to be a downturn before things start to normalize.
Let's finish this up talking a little bit about errors in payments and billing errors that arise, because that's like the worst, right? When you're trying to get your money and then something happens and you have to go back and fight it and find your records, and it's a really big pain when you come across errors. What types of solutions are out there, either from a shipper or a carrier or even an intermediary standpoint? How can you make your payments better to avoid those errors? Is it just being more diligent, or is it using technology?
It's a little bit of both. I think, it's a circumstance where in the industry, 1 out of every 3 invoices has some sort of error on it. And of course, there's so much complexity that goes into billing, right? Like you start with, okay, here's the line haul. But when it comes to accessorials that come up, how does a driver prove detention? Do they snap a picture of the clock when they arrive at a warehouse and then, snap a picture when they're leaving? There's the 2 components, right? So if we agree on the line haul, there's all of the other issues that go into it. Like, okay, did detention happen? How do we prove it? And if there's actually an error on the invoice, many shippers will say, hey, listen, our 90-day or 60-day window doesn't start until we've agreed on what the invoice is. So when an invoice with an error is received, that clock might not start, and that's actually going to make it even harder for a broker to collect the money they're owed and then in turn pay out the drivers. So I think, to answer your question, Kaylee, it's got to be a combination of, the account teams that work with carriers at a broker, making sure all the information is accurate. It's also got to be over time, that broker establishing credibility to say, look, our billing is accurate, our billing is on point. And to do so, it's got to be a combination of people actually looking at it, but potentially also using like basic logic and OCR technology, which reads invoices coming in, layering in some sort of machine learning to say, hey, this invoice says ABC is the cost. Is that accurate? Or with a certain degree of certainty, is that likely? And if that's the case, then you can alleviate some of the billing concerns or some of the errors that actually increase the amount of time it takes to get paid.
I think you're Exactly, spot on, especially with some of the attention that we'll be facing or will be shown to payments in this industry. If people want to get in touch with you or find more of your content, how can they do that?
On Twitter, I'm just at Mike Bush. Otherwise, check out nexttrucking.com.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you both. Have a great day.
Right now, we're going to head back over to the wall for our next carrier update.
Into this carrier update, Donnie, we talked about the ocean market in the last update. Now we're going to shift gears back into the truckload market. Obviously, saw volumes come back up, kind of as expected. Rejection's still kind of trending sideways.
As expected.
Yep.
But I did want to bring this up and show, hey, we got back above 10,000. I want to see it. To me, that's exciting. I want to see it and it sustain itself above 10,000. I don't believe that it will, but hopefully we'll keep right around that 10,000 mark. Above 10,000, thumbs up. Below 10,000, thumbs down. We don't want to see a constant decline below that 10,000. That would definitely show that we are deteriorating a lot rapidly than we expected. But hopefully we can make it through January and February and hopefully into March and kind of stay near that 10,000 point. And hopefully as we get into springtime, lawnmowers, lawn furniture, the beginning of summer, things will start to pick up because normally it kind of does in that time. March, April start to pick up and peak in July. It won't be as strong as the peak as we've seen in the past, but that's our only hope coming up.
Yeah, and my concern with that one is, and this is just anecdotal being here, I mean, you started to see those things already be in the stores. So, like, did we pull a lot of that stuff forward? And that's my concern with this moving in. We'll see activity in the summer just naturally and in that springtime, but did we pull some of that forward into this?
You'll normally start seeing those items hit the stores about mid-February.
Yeah.
So we're maybe a little bit early, but you're right. These items are probably already sitting in warehouses very close to these stores because they probably didn't either arrive late last year or, again, it was one of those items that they overbought and are actually sitting in warehouses.
Yep.
They're not going to be ordering a lot of this brand new out of other countries and shipping them in. So we're not going to see it in our Atlas or probably not really a lot of long distance movements on these types of items. So we'll see those pick up a little bit and we'll cross our fingers and hope maybe things will turn around. There's a lot of people that, you got 50% saying, we may not be heading into a recession. We got another half saying that it's going to be terrible and start about third quarter. So we'll see what happens. Definitely just keep an eye, at the trucking industry is a very great key indicator of how things are going. So we need to keep an eye on this over the next few months. Let's go to the next chart here. This is my head haul index. I touched base a little bit on this yesterday. I brought up V-haul, which is just the dry van. This is all markets, reefer, dry van, etc. And run to the blue is what we say. The blue markets have more outbound freight tenders than inbound trucks delivering that day. So there should be hopefully a heads up. Now, this does not include deadhead. So maybe if you're looking at Dallas here, you see Fort Worth beside it, they might be moving a lot of trucks over, so it may not work as well in your favor, but this is just a good indication. A lot of these large trucking companies will use these markets and jump their trucks in just to keep them moving, and it's a lot easier to keep them moving. If you're looking for freight opportunities, these blue ones with a lot of shading, a lot of volume in there, those would be the markets that I'd be aiming my trucks to. I'd probably jump out to a red to go for the money and then back.
Yeah, and I mean, that's southeast into the Midwest, right? I mean, where you have blue markets that have a lot of volume behind them, but they're surrounded by other blue markets, right? So that's where the kind of honey hole is. Because if you look out here on the West Coast, right, you've got, one blue market, maybe two, but surrounded by red. So all of those trucks that are in that market are going to be going back, deadheading back.
You brought up a very good point there, Tony. So blue surrounded by blue, but probably the two strongest regions are the Midwest and the Southeast. So this will probably be really the best two regions to be running your trucks between.
Absolutely. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, we'll take a quick break.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Let's go. Nobody works for free, so why should we be expecting our drivers to? Okay, let's just get it together now. What are some of those proactive steps that you can start taking now? For myself, I would like the Earth to still be here for a little bit longer, but you know, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, okay. Is pizza an open face sandwich? It's bread.
I have been ready for this question. I've seen the show.
We're all in this together.
Thanks for making me hungry. Now I want a hot dog.
You're welcome. Catch episodes of Check Call Tuesdays at 12:30 on FreightWaves TV. Keep up with all things Check Call on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for a second check of the weather this morning. We've got more snow moving up through the upper parts of the Rockies, and that's going to really kind of set up for the next winter storm system as well as we look ahead to the next week. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. These areas of the country, of course, no stranger to snow, especially this time of year. We've got some quick hitting and honestly some pretty impactful snow moving through southern Montana right now, the Billings area, I-94, and then down along I-90 down to the southeast. Do have winter storm watches and some winter storm warnings in place, as well as some high wind watches in place. So travel here going to be made difficult with the snow and then dangerous with the snow coupled with the wind. Blizzard conditions possible in some of this as these snow drifts start to move over the top of those interstates. So just be careful out there. Same thing along the northeast corner of Wyoming. We do have that winter weather advisory as well along the I-90 corridor moving from Wyoming down into South Dakota. Winter storm warnings in place there as well. Central Rockies still continuing to see some snow through the Denver metro, I-70 moving through those mountains, and then down I-25 into the Colorado, New Mexico area. Winter weather advisories in place there across central New Mexico as well, including I-40 just to the east of the Santa Rosa area. That's where the interstate gets kind of squirrely there. You start moving through those mountains, you get those mountain passes, and it can get pretty difficult there to drive through, especially with that winter weather. Slowly, the snow starts to taper off today into tomorrow before that next round of moisture rotates through up from the northwest. We're going to watch that as we continue to move throughout the end of the week. But of course, the big story is going to be that big winter storm that's across the eastern half of the country. We'll talk about that a little more coming up in the second hour of our show this morning. Right now, we're going to toss things over to Isaiah Buchanan for our next check of the social roundabout.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and NASA might be using nuclear rocket technology to start trying to send people to Mars. They are partnering with DARPA, that is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and DARPA posted this on their Twitter page. This shows just a model of the rocket. And so apparently this technology has been tried before, but it got stalled out. So now they're going to potentially start to retest this technology. Tests could begin anywhere as soon as 2027. And switching things up, Valentine's Day is just a couple of weeks away. And if you got that special someone in your life or special someone that you hate, maybe you want to name a cockroach after them. The Bronx Zoo is having one of their famous, they're having this thing where you can name a cockroach after somebody if you want to. You can get a roach tumbler, tote bag, virtual encounter with a Madagascar hissing cockroach. All of that together is $75. Some of the other zoos around the country have started doing this as well. The San Antonio Zoo does one called Cry Me a Cockroach, where you can name a cockroach after your ex. That's all I have for this edition of the Social Roundabout. Right now, I'm going to toss things back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
Anthony, do you have anyone that you dislike enough in your life to name a cockroach after them?
No, and after that segment, I can only imagine what some of our ancestors must be thinking if they were to see what we're selling for $75 right now.
Do you think that you would name a cockroach after Zach for $75?
Yes.
Exactly. All right, thanks for that, Isaiah. Let's go ahead and talk about what's coming up next. In just about a month for us here at FreightWaves, we have our Global Supply Chain Week headed to you. The biggest virtual event of the year, I think.
That's right, and there's something for everyone. If you're anywhere involved in the supply chain, this event is for you. We're going to cover it all over this event, and of course, free registration, can't beat that, and there's giveaways every single day.
So you can head to live.freightwaves.com and get signed up for that. It's a 5-day extravaganza from the 20th to the 24th of next month. We'll be hosting, so make sure that you see us there. Right now, we're going to take a look at the last 24 hours in freight with our market update.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
It's a good day coming.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now for our 10 a.m. hour. We're going to get you started with a look at your top stories this morning on FreightWaves.com. Union Pacific had its fourth quarter earnings call yesterday. The company said that it will aim to boost rail service and improve the quality of life for its employees in 2023. One of those measures to do that includes testing a program that would give employees a set schedule instead of having them on call. UP said that they are exploring additional options for crews, like having extra employees on hand, even in tough economic times, so that the rail network is able to keep up with service expectations while employees will get their requested time off. Tesla is investing $3.6 billion to build 2 new factories in Nevada, including a facility to mass produce its all-electric Class 8 semi. The other factory will produce batteries for the Tesla Cybertruck as well as for the semi. Together, the plants will create about 3,000 jobs. Tesla delivered its first semi-trucks to Frito-Lay in California last December, and CEO Elon Musk has said that the company will produce up to 50,000 semis per year. Amazon has launched a dedicated air cargo network in India through a partnership with third-party carrier QuickJet to increase delivery speeds for e-commerce orders to major cities. Amazon Air has slowed its growth in recent months alongside the slowing e-commerce demand, but this establishment shows that the retailer is still in expansion mode. The company will utilize capacity on 2 Boeing 737-800 series converted freighters. Amazon is also rolling out a new delivery service for prescription medications called RX Pass. The service will now allow Prime members to have multiple prescriptions delivered to their doorstep for a $5 monthly fee. The fee can be added on to those existing Prime memberships. RX Pass does not apply to Medicaid or Medicare, however, and it also does not allow payment via health insurance, like through a flexible spending account or a health savings account. There are 52 medications currently available for delivery. Company leadership estimates around 150 million Americans currently take a drug that is available on the platform. And PACCAR defied expectations with its fourth quarter and full year 2022 results, continuing a streak of strong quarter-over-quarter performance. The OEM set annual revenue and net income records across all its businesses, with Kenworth and Peterbilt achieving market share of 29.8% in 2022. These numbers trailed just behind Daimler, who reports its results in February. PACCAR said that Class 8 truck retail sales were 283,500 units in 2022, and they are expecting industry sales between 270 and 310,000 for the upcoming year in the US and Canada, and the same numbers in Europe. And you can find details of these stories and so much more on FreightWaves.com, as well as our FreightWaves app. Give us a like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and a follow on all of our social media channels. And don't forget to stay updated. You can head on over to tv.freightwaves.com and catch anything that you might have missed on FreightWaves TV. We're going to toss things back over to Tony and Donnie. They have their next carrier update.
Welcome into this carrier update, Donnie. What's going on in the diesel market? I mean, we're seeing upward moves.
Right here. This is the problem.
Yep.
This is our wholesale price. This is our rack price. Ultra low sulfur diesel rack.USA. And you can pull this up on your own charts, and you can see as this starts to continue to climb, we've reached that point in the spread where it is close enough together that fuel stations are going to start raising their prices. Mm-hmm. They let it go for quite some time. They absorbed a lot of costs. While it came back up and went down and came back up, we kept a steady downward price trend on diesel. This is blue line is the average price at a diesel truck stop across America. And as this went up and up, they continue to let prices go down. They finally met their match. And so we're not doing it anymore. So this continues to go up. They're at the bottom end of their buffer zone, and they're pushing up these rates right here.
Yep. And that's the concern, I think, is it's just starting, right? I mean, we look here, January 5th, right? That's when that rack price bottomed out, and we've been on the rise ever since. Retail prices were on the decline. It took until the 16th to see any upward movement. And now it's moved to almost 3 cents, 3 cents. I mean, it's not been a big move. Meanwhile, we're talking about a 50-cent increase over on the rack side. So at some point, that increase is going to accelerate. And I think that's the concern is if you got used to this declining prices, it's gone for at least a short period of time.
And one thing that we've been talking about outside of TV is what are a lot of these companies doing right now? We see fourth quarter results coming out. making a lot of predictions, a lot of changes, and it's cut cost, because they're afraid the revenue is going to change. Well, if the revenue starts to come down, the best way to keep their profits up is to cut the cost. This is a this is the number one and number two cost for trucking companies is drivers and diesel fuel. And this is now going back up. So it's going to cost them more to run their truck each mile. And right now rates are going the opposite direction. So this alone is going to put a really big squeeze on large and small. I don't care if you have fuel contracts or not. This is still going to squeeze all those trucking companies.
Yeah, that operating ratio very quickly turned from 95 to 105.
Yes. Next chart here, we'll see the squeeze. We'll see the spread. We're down to 104. Like I say, they want to stay between that 90, or that once it gets in that between 90 and 110, it's when they start pushing back or leveling out or start pushing those rates back up. As we get closer to that, like I say, that dollar mark, maybe below the dollar, that's when we're really going to start seeing these diesel fuel prices shoot back up, maybe 2 or 3 cents a day versus just a half a cent, Tony. So something to keep an eye on is this spread. Is if it continues to go down, then they're going to start getting more aggressive on pushing those fuel prices up.
Yeah, and one way I look at this, right, outside of just the spread for diesel, I mean, these larger enterprise fleets that can buy at the rack and ultimately they're getting the whole or the retail price from their customers in that fuel surcharge. Well, when this goes down, that spread or that revenue generated from fuel surcharges narrows, and what's going to be interesting in fourth quarter results is how much of an impact did fuel surcharges play on that revenue number, and what is the impact going to be in Q1 as we see revenue as a whole declining?
Yeah, take those fourth quarter numbers and take that fuel revenue out and see what their numbers look like then. All right, so when we come back, we'll look at some lanes of the day.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, Donnie. As always, right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
And thank you for that carrier update. We'll get one more before we're done here for the day. Right now, we're going to welcome in our next live guest. And we've got Blythe Brumleve with us, host of Everything is Logistics. Blythe, thank you for joining us today. And we're going to talk a little bit about the art of the warm sell. I think that everybody knows cold calling is a thing. Cold selling is a thing, of course. But what about warm sales? And is it nicer when it's warmer?
Absolutely. I'm a Florida girl at heart, so everything is better when it's warm temperatures, or for, I guess, a variety of things. And so the art of warm selling really was a central theme around the recent FreightWaves Sales and Marketing Summit. I watched all of it. I took notes, did a podcast on it, and now I would love to talk to you people about the art of warm selling.
That's amazing. And Blythe, of course, I'm sorry about the Jacksonville Jaguars, but when we get into the art of warm selling, how do we approach warm selling? What is a warm sell?
So the really central part of it is using social media as a way to get your audience and even your leads to know about you before you ever shake their hand. And so using social media as sort of that digital handshake. And one perfect example was Lars Ward from FreightWaves, which if you're on LinkedIn, you probably have seen a variety of posts from not only him, but also the FreightWaves team. And they are essentially all over LinkedIn. And that was a very conscious choice whenever they launched their company a couple years ago, is that they were going to dominate on LinkedIn and just let people know about the type of company that they have, the type of culture that they have. And they really went above and beyond for a lot of their different social media posts. And so when they were at the FreightWaves, the conference that we just had back in November, and they were talking about how people were coming up to them, leads that they wanted to speak to, but just hadn't gotten around to reaching out to, were coming up to them live at the conference in order to meet them in person, making that warm sale a lot easier. And eventually some of those people became customers of theirs. And so they attribute it all back to LinkedIn. And that was one of the big talking points from the FreightWaves Sales and Marketing Summit, is that they use social media to sort of introduce their company culture, their green initiatives, how there's a lot of shippers out there who are looking, they have their bosses sort of kind of breathing down their neck about getting more environmentally friendly. And so knowing that, FreightWaves has posted about they plant one tree for every load that they move. So because of that initiative, now they're getting customers coming up to them and potentially doing business with them because of social media. So warm selling.
I think it's so fascinating because social media is so algorithm driven that it gives you a chance to get in front of people who aren't your audience for free, right? Like, I'll take this from example. I just posted an Instagram photo yesterday, right? And my engagements on it, like 300 of my followers were engagements. Over 1,400 engagements from people who are non-followers, that warm sell, right? Just because the algorithm decided to push that type of content, especially on a platform like LinkedIn that is very, very algorithm heavy and algorithm dependent and dependent on those interactions. Can you talk a little bit about the value of kind of the free marketing that you get, because it makes that warm sell possible without having to do a lot of work or spend any money really?
Exactly. And it makes your paid efforts down the line so much easier because you are posting organically. I mean, you're only investing really time into creating those posts. So you're investing that time and you're getting that reach. And you're also seeing a shift for a lot of these social media platforms where, you know, before it was Facebook, Instagram, they're showing you people that you know, people that you choose to follow, your friends, your family, things like that. But now because of TikTok and the influence that TikTok has had over all of these different platforms, they are really showing you content that you like, that you've already expressed interest in, not necessarily folks that you already know. You know, the engagement level for, you know, an aunt's picture of your cousin's third baby or whatever kind of situation is probably not going to resonate with you as much as, and maybe it will, I don't know, but it might not resonate as much as, say, like a new yoga pose or, you know, a new workout that you really want to get into. And so that's where a lot of this shift is happening. Twitter the other day just kind of made a lot of their users a little upset, and, you know, a bunch over the last few months, but they changed their page or their following page to a following or a For You page. And that is a direct ripoff of TikTok, kind of proving that, you know, it's really about the content itself, not necessarily who you know anymore.
And Blythe, does that really kind of make it so that it's almost a level playing field for small creators to really have a lot of exposure, or really does that kind of devalue someone's brand if they're trying to really build out their following?
Well, I think there's also there's always power in, you know, the riches are in the niches. And so there's an ability to start out with a certain, I guess, customer profile, an ICP that you have in mind that you really want to appeal to. Like for me, I really want to appeal to the one-person marketer because that's who I am. And so that's what I want to create content for. And so if you create content with that niche in mind, you can always go bigger. It's very difficult to start big and then try to go niche. So it's always advised to sort of start with what interests you the most, especially when, you know, if you're a broker or you're somebody trying to get more business in the next year, who is that target audience that you are trying to speak to, and using your content to speak specifically to that audience. And when you really feel like you've dialed it in, and it takes at least a year to feel like you've really dialed it in, then you can start to expand out and start to reach those bigger audiences.
So Blythe, I want to get your thoughts on the idea that warmth is conductive. Heat is conductive, right? If you warm sell to someone who's your direct counterpart, I'm warm selling to Anthony, and then he bumps over into his friend, my warm sell then could potentially transfer through Anthony and into his friend, right? Can you touch a little bit about on how valuable that is for a marketer too? Because then you have not only not having to spend a whole lot of money or really even time and effort for that initial warm sell, then it gets passed on down the line without you having to do a lot of work either.
100%. There was another line that really stuck out to me, is that's what Dooner said. And he said, it's the who's, not the views. And so whoever is, you know, looking at your content, and word of mouth still reigns king. It always has, it probably always will. And so having that positive interaction of who's looking at your content and who is introducing, you know, someone to your content, because, you know, not all content is going to be relevant to the audience that you're trying to reach at that particular moment, but they might know somebody who is. And so referring that piece of content, sharing that piece of content, you can really tell this by looking at the amount of saves on your content or the amount of shares, which a lot of social media platforms will do now. And that's also a trigger to their algorithms to let them know that people are finding that content very valuable enough to share it with someone else, and then to also save it in case they want to reference it in the future. That's sort of the holy grail when it comes to social media marketing, is how many saves can you get on a post, or how many shares can you get on that post, because they like it that that much that they're going to share it out with their friends. And it's not just, in a digital environment, but absolutely word of mouth is still, for me personally and anecdotally for a lot of my clients, it is word of mouth is the number one reason that people are listing. How did you hear about us? And it's typically a referral.
And Blythe, when we're looking at really content and content creators and really putting out more media, is there a middle ground of really how much or how consistent you have to be? Or can someone just really try to curate their content and just say, hey, you know what, I'm going to put out something big maybe once a month and just swing for the fences? Is there any kind of middle ground here when we're looking at how much to put out before saturating or making sure that you are putting out enough to keep people engaged?
We lost Blythe there.
Oh no.
It's all good. But I think that's a super, super important part too. It's like we see a lot of these creators who went from small creators to big creators just by like flooding the algorithm with content. And so that's interesting to watch for sure. Anthony, I know that you're not super big on the TikTok space, but how do you feel about social media and kind of getting into that niche?
So one of the big things I really kind of appreciate is that it's just so much easier for anyone to get a part of it now, and that the technology is there. We all went through the pandemic, and we all have these amazing webinar setups at our disposal here. So I really love how easy it is to just put out content, and really the kind of more rough the content is sometimes, the more authentic it feels of like, hey, this person isn't trying to sell me anything, they're just putting out their opinion right now.
Authenticity is king. All right, and of course you can catch Blythe Brumleve on her show, Everything is Logistics. Go follow her at Digital Dispatch. Give her a follow on LinkedIn as well. And I believe that she'll be out at Manifest next week with Grace Sharkey, Dooner himself, and some of our other folks from FreightWaves, so definitely reach out to them as well. Anthony, it is not Monday, but we've decided to move our hot seat segment from Mondays to Wednesdays.
Oh, do you know who's on this hot seat, or do we just have to be surprised by the guest?
You know what? We've got Sal Mercogliano joining us on this hot seat segment today. And super exciting because predictions that he made in this one actually ended up coming true as of this morning. So what is that? You'll just have to check it out. Let's check it out right now.
Welcome in once again to the hot seat, ladies and gentlemen. And when you get involved with fire, you better come prepared. And that's exactly what our guest has done today. Dr. Sal Mercogliano joins us from Bowie's Creek, North Carolina, in full gear. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Bill. I'm not in full gear. I just brought the helmet for today. I just want to be prepared for when I get into the hot seat. So I thought I'd at least bring the helmet with me.
You're definitely on point today, that is for sure. I've got 10 questions for you, sir. You ready?
I'm ready to go. Let's go ahead.
All right, first one, kind of always the same kind of question, but I want to throw it at you here anyway. In your opinion, what is the biggest problem in freight right now?
I think the biggest problem from my perspective is, once again, appreciating the role that the mariners and the ocean plays in our supply chain logistics. I think we tend to focus on it when there's a problem and when there's an issue, and then when everything is rolling and moving along, we tend to forget about it quite a bit. And that's one of my key things, is to bring that to the attention of everybody all the time.
Excellent point there. Number two, this should be easy given what's behind you there as well. What is the best book that you have ever read that has helped you in the freight or the maritime freight industry there? And I see you probably have a lot to choose from.
I do, and I'm going to go with one that I think everybody should read because I think it's probably one of the best, and that is Mark Levinson's The Box, which talks about the development of the container and how that very seamless invention created not by a shipping guy but by a truck driver by the name of Malcolm McLean revolutionized the way we move freight around the world.
Excellent there. All right, so we know you've spent plenty of hours on a ship, and this is for those of us land lovers that maybe have never stepped onto a vessel. What's the best song to play on a ship on a long trip? And I'm guessing it's not The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
It's not. You really don't want to play that. I think the best song to play. I mean, the best song to play when you're going out is "Come Sail Away," I think, by Styx. But when you're coming back in, it's got to be anything associated with food and drink. So, Cheeseburger in Paradise from Buffett is always a good one because that's a classic song of returning back to port and getting what you want.
Gotcha. Great stuff there as well. What is the worst route you have ever had to endure on a ship?
Oh, the worst voyage I ever had at all was heading down to, of all places, down into the Caribbean. We had to go between 2 hurricanes. And that was the first time I ever been on a ship that took a 51-degree roll. And that was probably the worst. And we were with a batch of smaller Navy warships, and we got it better than they did. But the minute a ship goes more than 45 degrees, it's easier to stand on the wall than it is on the floor. So I think that was the worst ride I ever had. Didn't sleep, didn't get a lot of kind of sack time at all during that time. I didn't eat much either.
Gotcha. All right. So obviously you've been following everything that's been going on the West Coast right now. And of course, for the last several months, we've been going through labor talks with the ILWU. Give me your gut feeling. Obviously earlier, late last year, we had rail go through similar negotiations. They ended up in Congress. This doesn't seem like it's going to end up there, although I could be wrong. What's your gut feeling about how this is going to end?
I actually don't think it's going to end very well here in the short term. I think we're going to have issues here because I think labor's not in the driver's seat anymore. Now I think it's the PMA is in it, and we're already seeing some inclinations of that out of Oakland, and some shutouts and lockouts getting ready to happen. So I'm worried that since they didn't come to an agreement when everything was good for them to come to an agreement, that we may see a repeat of slowdowns as we did in 2014 and 2015, and then you're going to have the government intercede.
Mm-hmm. We know you've got a great YouTube channel on what's going on with shipping. What's the best comment you've ever gotten on your YouTube channel?
I think the best comment I get all the time is I really wish I had you as a professor. You make the most, I guess one of the best ones was you make the most boring topic interesting, and that to me is always a good one. So I'll go with that one.
Gotcha. I love asking this question, but I'm especially like it because obviously I ask it mostly to truckers and to people who do a lot of traveling on land. But as far as on sea, what's the best meal you've ever had in a port of call, not in America, or maybe not to your native southeastern area?
Oh, I was a firm advocate. Wherever you go, you eat the local food. I'm not one of those who likes to travel and eat at Pizza Hut overseas. So I love getting whatever is local. I would have to say eating probably some local dishes in Singapore, somewhere in the Far East. It was always good. And you would just get whatever they had. And I can't even tell you half the time what it was. It was always ordering what was recommended. And sometimes it's good not to know. Can I be clear? I think there was a time in Korea I ate some things I don't want to know what I ate. So probably better not always to ask details.
Number 8, will we see an end to the alliances at the major shipping level? And if so, how will this be broken up?
I think what you're going to see is to be on the lookout for is a split between Maersk and Mediterranean Shipping. They're in an agreement for another year or so. And they're the biggest. I mean, you're talking about 35%. They are the big behemoths. And the question is, do they keep going together because they're the big force? You're getting to the point where they're getting so big that if they get over 40% of the share, it's going to be a problem. And so they may wind up splitting to do it. And then you always have the issue of them targeting one or more groups to kind of run them out. Right now, you got 3 alliances with 9 companies spread across them. But there's always a danger of what we saw in 2016, 2017 with a Hanjin Marine being targeted and run out. But I think the big thing is to watch a split between the 2M alliance, Maersk and MSC.
I remember you saying that the only way to split them up as far as the governments would be concerned would be to design them as a cartel. But obviously, if things can happen before that, that certainly solves that problem to a degree. Number 9, what is going to be the next great piece of legislation that's going to be written for maritime law, or the next great repeal, in other words, and with regard to maritime shipping? And tell me it's not going to be the repeal of the Jones Act.
What I'm going to tell you is I hope it's a reform of the Jones Act. That's what I hope for. I hope we already saw ocean shipping get the Ocean Shipping Reform Act with international shipping. I'm hoping to see something akin to that on the domestic side and really look at a reform to that. I'm hoping that there's starting to be more and more traction to talk about this. How do we fix what's going on in not just the coastwise trade, but really U.S. maritime trade? We're seeing this with a lot of countries wanting to restart national fleets. We see see more competition now in the high seas, and I think there's an awakening to that. And so I'm hoping to see something along those lines begin to take place.
Excellent there. All right, last question for you, always the same. Fill in the blank. Freight is blank.
My helmet for last question.
Okay.
Freight?
Okay, all right.
Freight is, I'm trying to think what here. Freight is shipping. I hate to say it, but it is ocean shipping. Ocean shipping is the key for what we want to talk about. And I think one of the things that we came to realize during the supply chain, and what you all do at FreightWaves extremely well, is talk about the interlocking and interconnectivity of freight. Freight is everyday life. It is how we survive as a society. But I think the key element for me is always going to be the ocean shipping side.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Salmo Tagliano, you have proven to be flame retardant. Thanks for being on the hot seat.
That's what I aim to do. Thanks, Bill.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our final look at the weather for your day. We're talking about some really difficult travel conditions coming across the Northeast as that area of snow starts to expand everywhere from the far Great Lakes up through New England. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. We've got a lot of snowfall on the radar up right now, everywhere from central Pennsylvania and northern parts of West Virginia, up in through New York, up into the far parts of New England. With that, basically all of this area is just one gigantic winter weather advisory right now, with some winter storm warnings sprinkled in here or there. So heavy snowfall throughout those areas, including Pittsburgh, up to Buffalo, through Harrisburg, Philadelphia, Scranton, Pennsylvania, up to Connecticut. Basically anywhere from Pennsylvania northward, you've got snow going on right now. That does include the New York City metro. So for a lot of these areas, travel is going to be pretty difficult here for today and into tomorrow. But because it is the Northeast, it is New England, they're equipped for that kind of stuff. They should get roads cleared here pretty quickly. Further out towards the west, the Midwest, we do have some, again, heavy bands of snow rotating in. Chicago included, down through Indianapolis, Indiana, Bloomington, Illinois. We've got some heavy snow moving on in. But that should be ending fairly quickly, ending from the west to east, that is, from today. And then there is the dry slot in this storm going on just in the middle. With that, though, because that dry slot's come through, there is going to be the chance for some pretty strong winds, especially across eastern and central Tennessee. Down here in Freight Alley, up into the southern parts of the Appalachians, we've got wind advisories in place. Sustained wind's going to be about 15 to 20 miles an hour in some spots, gusts between 45 and 50, especially in those higher elevations. And then the leading edge of that storm, we do have some pretty strong weather moving across the area right now. So there is the chance for severe weather across the eastern parts of South Carolina and Georgia, coastal Carolinas, and then down into the Florida Panhandle. Tornado watches in place, especially through the Florida Panhandle today, as that line organizes and is pretty strong moving to the east. But this line will be pretty quick hitting and should be out of there by the afternoon hours today. Overall, just a messy situation up for New England and the central parts of the Midwest. But as I mentioned, it should clear out of here by the middle to the end of this week. That's it for weather today. We will toss things back over to Isaiah now for a final check of the social roundabout.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan. And man, some people are just lucky. Check out this video of a customer from McDonald's who, instead of getting his food, was given thousands of dollars. Check this out.
I just went to McDonald's and these handed me my sausage McMuffin and this bag. Well, what's in this bag? Their deposit. Why? Just a couple $1,000s here. Like, what is this? Why would they do this? What the So now I have to return this because I'm a good person, I guess. Yeah, how interesting. Okay, I'm at McDonald's.
He's a much better guy than I am, because McDonald's probably wouldn't have seen that money if that would have been something that happened to me. Switching things up a little bit, nuclear technology might be the future of space travel. NASA is partnering with DARPA, that's the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and they posted this on their Twitter page just a couple days ago. So nuclear rocket technology could be used in space travel going forward. Apparently this technology was tried before, but the project stalled out. But NASA says that tests for this technology could resume as early as 2027. So that's all I have for this edition of the Social Roundabout. Right now, I'm going to toss things back over to Anthony and Kaylee.
Anthony, if NASA comes to you and says, you know what, we're putting you on the rocket and sending you to the moon, would you say yes?
No.
Or to Mars? I guess it's going to Mars.
I'd just say, you know what, just keep it going into space, because I know if I go to Mars, I'm probably not going to come back. So let's just see how far I can go.
Anthony says, let's go all the way to the outer reaches of the solar system. Why not?
Send it.
Send it. All right, Isaiah, thank you for that. We're going to welcome in our last live guest of the day, and we've got Noy Mahoney joining us, our Borderlands writer, to talk a little bit about what Mexico needs to do to stand out in 2023. Noy, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
So let's dig right into this. It feels like we've had a lot of really positive news about Mexico and kind of their place to take a foothold in the nearshoring operations and really is this strong North American manufacturing partner. What do they really need to do, though, to ensure that that place is secure?
Well, I think before the pandemic, Mexico was sort of knocking on the door of
globalization. And when the pandemic happened, the door sort of swung open for them, giving them an opportunity to really take advantage of, companies that are looking to shorten their supply chains and secure their supply chains. And, going forward, what Mexico really could do, or what it needs to do, on a government level, it needs to show the world that, it is a pro business environment for, companies to come invest, factories in the country. Right now, there's sort of this view that maybe, the current administration in Mexico is not the friendliest towards foreign investment, and that's because of stuff such as the ongoing energy dispute that Mexico has with the United States, and so some of the other things going on. There's been some USMCA trade disputes, so the country really needs to show the rest of the world that it is pro-business, and your investments are safe in our country.
And of course, Mexico has lots to gain from a fruitful relationship with the U.S., but they're also positioned very well to have an impactful relationship with South America. Do you see this as really being an area that they could really kind of expand into as well, and just kind of put maybe the U.S. on the back burner as those relationships kind of solidify?
Yeah, that's a great point that I've heard that, global manufacturers, shippers, they're not just putting factories to take advantage of Mexico's proximity to the United States. It's also to take advantage of Mexico's proximity to South American countries, such as, Brazil, which has become their economy, even though they've had some political problems in the past few months, their economy, remains pretty strong compared to for South America. So Mexico is in a good spot to take advantage not only of, North American consumers, but also South American consumers. And it's up to, the current administration to really, solidify its
Obviously, we hear a lot about Mexico in the news for kind of nefarious activity and bad actors, and there's still a lot of cartel activity that goes down there, which has some people kind of have reservations about safety of really being in Mexico overall, but not even necessarily doing their business down there. Do you think that that's something that needs to maybe be cleaned up reputation-wise? Are they just getting a bad rap, or is there legitimate concerns for safety of people moving to Mexico or factories and operations moving to Mexico because there is that nefarious activity?
I definitely think there's legitimate concerns, about cartel violence or cargo theft. That threat is real. It's not just, something that's the media has created. And I've heard from, carriers and third-party logistics providers that that's something that the government needs to address on, the national level, or state governments need to address, for their particular state, that they need to do something about cargo theft, which, I forgot the exact number, but it increased, from 2021 to 2022. I believe it increased something like 7 to 10% overall for the entire country. So it is a real problem in Mexico that needs to be addressed with better, securities on the highways and roads.
And Noy, speaking of that government aspect, are there any types of legislation or any types of policies that are in play right now that could be something to better facilitate Mexico as a stronger partner for the U.S. and nearshoring and reshoring initiatives? Or do you think that this really kind of has to come through relationship building, or can this really kind of be put into some kind of policy changes?
Well, I know Mexico is in the process the past few months of solidifying its trade agreements with a lot of Asian countries and European countries, which is, I think, the government's way, the Mexican government's way of saying, put your factory in Mexico. We have trade agreements, with the United States and Canada. We have these trade agreements with, European nations and Asian countries. I believe they even have, I don't know if they've finalized a new trade agreement with China, but I know they've been working on it for the past few months. So it's interesting to me that they're basically trying to create, almost a free trade zone across their entire country of Mexico showing that, we are open for business. The question is, like I said in some of the earlier comments, is can they show people that the government or the current administration is pro-business, and can they take care of those problems of cargo theft that keep popping up?
So speaking of our neighbors to the north, Canada obviously does a lot of business with the United States, and they have kind of this very similar governmental structure, which makes it the easy player to do it with. Do they need to be worried about any types of intense relations with Mexico? Could Canada possibly lose their market share with the United States? Or are we two completely different beasts when it comes to what we're trading and how we're trading with each country, that they really shouldn't have an impact on each other?
I think they could have minor impacts, but I think the manufacturing base in Canada is a little different than Mexico. And I think, for the United States, Mexico, and Canada, we need to stop thinking of ourselves as adversaries and more as partners. In a way, we should think of ourselves as North America versus the rest of the world. And I think that would be the best way to go forward for all three of our countries, and to create, such a strong base of operations for companies in all three countries that, we're the dominant superpower when it comes to manufacturing.
And Noah, this might be a bit of a long shot here, but when we're thinking about China, they are a country that is no stranger to investing. And so they have invested heavily, of course, in Africa over the last decade or so. Do you think there's any chance that we see China start to heavily invest in Mexico to retain some proximity to the U.S. and North America?
That's a great question. The Mexican government a few months ago, the foreign trade minister said that, we have 400 companies from Asia that want to invest in Mexico in 2023. She said a lot of them were from China. So, China has been such a dominant, global manufacturer for so many years that I really believe they're not going to go anywhere. It's just that, going forward, companies, shippers, they want to diversify their supply chains, secure their supply chains in case, we have situations like the pandemic or, the Russia-Ukraine war, or any situation that could disrupt supply chains. They don't want to just have all their factories in one country, whether it's China or Malaysia or wherever. And I see that China is also doing the same thing. They don't want to have all their factories in their own country. So you see a lot of these Chinese shippers, manufacturers, wanting to diversify where their factories are located. That's why you see a lot of investment in Mexico.
So with this as well, this investment coming, obviously this means a very positive aspect for the labor market in Mexico, which traditionally we have seen a lot of Mexican workers come to the United States seeking these good jobs, whether that's in labor or manufacturing or agriculture. Do you think as we continue to see this transition, maybe we see immigration from Mexico to the United States decrease because now you have Mexicans who are actively seeking employment in their own country?
That's really interesting. I think, being close to the border, I live down in San Antonio. As long I grew up here and as long as I've known, there's always been a lot of people coming from Mexico trying to get into the United States. And I really don't see that changing just because the wages in Mexico are much lower compared to the United States and other countries. And the ability to make a lot of money or more money in the United States than they could in Mexico is probably not going to change in the near future. Now, that being said, there are more jobs available in Mexico, with all the nearshoring going on, and there are better paying jobs than there used to be. And the cost of, or the quality of life is going up in Mexico compared to previous decades. But I don't see, the influx of workers or people from Mexico trying to get into the U.S. I believe it'll probably slow down, but I don't think it'll stop completely.
And Noy, as we continue to look at this development in Mexico, is there any kind of timeline that Mexico is on? And if so, what's on that timeline?
I think the timeline it's interesting because the current president, the current administration, I believe his term is up in 2 years. And it'll be interesting to see what the next administration comes in and does. Presidents in Mexico can only serve one term, and it's a 6-year term. And so every 6 years, the government has to sort of reset. And it'll be interesting to see what the next administration does, whether there'll be more pro-business, open that door completely for, globalization, or will they be sort of more the same, such as this current administration, which is trying to keep, nationalize, industries such as energy and other things. But the timeline we'll know a lot more once this current administration leaves office.
All right, Noah, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you as always, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Right now, we're going to take one more break before we get you settled off and out of here for the rest of the day. Stay tuned.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
It's a good day coming.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our final check of your top stories this morning. Amazon is rolling out a new delivery service for prescription medications called RX Pass. The service will allow Prime members to have multiple prescriptions delivered to their doorsteps for a $5 monthly fee. That fee can be added on to their existing Prime membership as well. RX Pass does not apply to Medicare or Medicaid members, and it also does not allow payment via health insurance, like through a flexible spending account or a health savings account. There are 52 medications currently available for delivery. Company leadership estimates around 150 million Americans currently take a drug that is available on the platform. PACCAR defied expectations with its fourth quarter and full year 2022 results, continuing a streak of strong quarter-over-quarter performance. The OEM set annual revenue and net income records across all its businesses, with Kenworth and Peterbilt achieving market share of 29.8% in 2022. These numbers trailed behind Daimler, who reports its results in February. PACCAR said that its Class 8 truck retail sales were 283,500 units in 2022. They are expecting industry sales between 270 and 310,000 units for the upcoming year in the United States and Canada, with the same expectations in Europe. And the global container shipping network is poised for a major shakeup as the 2M vessel sharing alliance between MSC and Maersk is being dissolved. The two carriers said that they mutually agreed to terminate the alliance effective January of 2025, exactly within the 2-year notice period. The decision will have no immediate effect on alliance services, and Maersk said that it will seek to minimize any disruptions through the network leading up to the termination. And you can find details of these stories and more up on FreightWaves.com and our FreightWaves app. If you're watching live on our YouTube channel, like and subscribe to stay updated, and give us a follow on social media while you're at it. For the full FreightWaves TV experience, head on over to tv.freightwaves.com. We'll finish out your Wednesday with a final carrier update.
Welcome into this final carrier update, Donnie. We talked about it, Midwest, one of the stronger areas to run. This is a lane that you like because you like getting up into that Wisconsin area, but it's Indianapolis to Green Bay.
Yeah, it's always been for over probably 18 months now. This has actually been a really strong lane by the rates. And so here, even as it deteriorates, we see Indianapolis picking up in a dry van, headed out to Green Bay, 400 miles. Now, this is not an easy 400 miles.
Yeah.
Maybe the first 200, 150s, Indianapolis to almost to Chicago is going to be easy. But once you hit Chicago, you got Milwaukee and then, of course, Green Bay. So it's not an easy 400 miles, but it still pays $308. Sorry, $3.08 a mile. And so you can make, if you can make this in a day, that's, $1,200 of revenue on that truck per day if you can make one up, one back, one up, one back. And of course, that's a very good average for revenue per truck per day. So this is a good lane. But coming back, if you hit a little double arrows up there and swap this lane around, and we do Green Bay coming back to Indianapolis here on the next chart, it pays a little bit better. $4.02, $4.02. And it's also actually going down some right now, but now we're looking at about $1,600 on the way back. So average that out, you're looking at $1,400 a day. That's pretty good revenue per day per truck.
Yeah.
So this is why I like this lane, Tony. This is why I consistently bring it up. I hope everybody's jumping in there and trying to book this lane. And these are spot market rates. So maybe if you see this higher going back, maybe if you're in Indianapolis and you have the opportunity to take freight to Green Bay on a contract, maybe yes, maybe no, comparing to that price, you may jump on that and then come back at $1,600 on spot rates.
Yeah.
Still would be a very good run. All right, next lane here. We got Green Bay to Indianapolis.
Yeah, you turn the reefer on.
Turn the reefer on.
And it looks even better. I mean, an extra 80 cents a mile coming out.
You get about 80 cents a mile better when you turn that reefer on. So this is a lane that you could take advantage of running dry van or a reefer. Number one, a reefer can be a dry van. You just cut the cooling unit off. And right now, with all the weather going back and forth between that area, you see there's weather from Chicago all the way through the Northeast right now. You could maybe run up in dry van or run up in reefer, swap it out, and you run up in dry van, come back with the reefer on, and pull in $4.82, which is, again, 80 cents a mile better than what the running back on a dry van is. So you have a lot of options.
Yeah, and that's the key is, yes, it's a little more niche being a reefer this lane, but it pays more because of that. But, I mean, still, overall, I mean, dry van, reefer, doesn't really matter. The rate, especially compared to the NTI, is pretty healthy.
Yeah, and you can use this market dashboard, especially if you're a reefer. Look at these different lanes, look at your different options of dry van or reefer, and see what will be the best options for you to make in your customer, for your company to make you the most money. All right, now we're going to jump to the next lane. On the next chart here. Chicago to Allentown. Chicago, I wanted to talk about Memphis today because Memphis was a big blue spot there on our head haul index. But you mentioned Memphis in the daily watch today, so I'm going to skip Memphis. I'm going to jump onto Chicago. Chicago is another hot market that's stayed very tight for spot rates. Chicago to Allentown, PA. I know we're headed to the Northeast, but we saw it build up. It's coming back down, but it's still at $3.26 a mile. So keep an eye on the Chicago market as well. Run it through Market Dashboard. Any freight that I could accept going into Chicago right now as a carrier, I'd be accepting all my contract into Chicago, and anything coming out spot market wise is going to pay well.
Absolutely. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for the updates this morning. We'll be sure to check in with you again tomorrow. Right now, we'll hand it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you for that. And of course, we'll have y'all back tomorrow morning for more on our State of the Carrier. We are done here for the day, but we've got lots more coming up for your Wednesday on FreightWaves TV.
That's right. So as you mentioned, Kaylee, it's Wednesday, so that means in just about an hour, we have our flagship show, What the Truck, coming on with Dooner himself. And we also have Point of Sale.
Absolutely. And shameless plug for tomorrow's content. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, you can join FreightWaves founder and CEO Craig Fuller and Zach Strickland, our head of market intelligence, for a webinar on the state of freight. Definitely don't want to miss that one for sure.
That's right. And we also have Truck Tech with Alan Adler. You heard from him earlier this morning. So if you liked what you heard, which I'm sure you did, you can catch more of him a little bit later on.
You can always head over to tv.freightwaves.com to catch any reruns of anything that you've missed either from today or from previous in the week. And while you're there, head on over to live.freightwaves.com and get registered for Global Supply Chain Week, our very next virtual event.
That's right. There's going to be tons of giveaways and tons of networking there. But that's going to do it for this show. We'll see you tomorrow, and stay tuned for more content.